The story begins with a girl and her mother. Her mother always told her to be honest because honesty leads to goodness and goodness brings happiness. The girl believed it completely, but life didn't agree. One day, her honesty got her killed. She wakes up on the ground in a different universe. A demon-like creature with horns walks up and tells her not to lie there or her clothes will get dirty and she might catch a cold. She looks up at him, feeling like she could be useful to him in this new place. He leans down and kisses her. She presses her hands against the ground, flustered, and says he told her not to lie there. He grins and says, "I did, but you're too cute. Let's take this somewhere better, like my place." The scene opens in her boss's office. She's sitting across from him as he delivers the news. She's losing her job. Stunned, she stares at him, trying to process. Didn't she just help the company by exposing a major issue? Her boss leans forward and explains that the person she reported is an important figure in the company. He asks if she understands how much the company could lose if those people face consequences. She tries to explain herself, saying she only did what was right, but he cuts her off and says it's better if she leaves quietly. He even adds, "You should be thankful it's ending here." With a forced smile, he wishes her well and tells her to be careful on her way home. Later that evening, she's walking home feeling defeated. Her thoughts are racing as she wonders how things got so unfair. People who do wrong walk free, while those who speak up face the consequences. Frustrated, she shouts into the night, "Life isn't fair." It feels strangely good, and she's relieved no one is around to hear her. She thinks about how she could never work in a place so corrupt. As she walks through a dark alley, someone comes up behind her and hits her hard. She falls to the ground, feeling pain and confusion. The man tells her she made a mistake by speaking out. Before she can react, he attacks her again and leaves her injured. She lies there in the cold, bleeding, as snow begins to fall. Her mind is overwhelmed with thoughts. Was she supposed to stay silent and accept corruption? No, that's not who she is. She remembers the promise she made to stand up against injustice. In her mind, she sees the doll her mother gave her, almost as if it's telling her to stay strong and keep fighting. The doll tells her to open her eyes and decide how she wants to live. When she does, she finds herself in a beautifully furnished room. She looks around, confused but impressed. Her clothes are elegant, her wounds still hurt, and she remembers being attacked. She wonders if the room belongs to the person who saved her and decides they must be rich. As she walks toward a wardrobe to look for her bag, she catches her reflection in a mirror and freezes. Her hair is blue, long enough to nearly touch the floor. Her eyes are a different color, and her body looks slightly older and stronger. The door opens, and a tall man with horns walks in. She greets him nervously, assuming he saved her. He asks how she's feeling, towering over her with his pointy ears and massive frame. She asks who he is, and he sighs, telling her not to mess with him. She thinks she's being serious, but he seems frustrated. He mutters about her being attacked, reaches out to check her head, and moves his hand lower to check her injuries. Shocked, she slaps him hard, hurting her own hand more than his face. He looks at her calmly and tells her to take it easy. Flustered, she says he shouldn't touch her when she doesn't even know him. He frowns, clearly irritated, and asks if she's serious. She insists she doesn't know him. Frustrated, he calls for a doctor, muttering about something being wrong with her. A tall, friendly-looking woman enters the room. Relieved, she asks to talk to the doctor alone. The man hesitates but eventually steps out after some persuasion. The next morning, she wakes up suddenly, thinking she's late for work, only to remember she's already been fired. She sighs and lies back down, but then it hits her. Work shouldn't even be her main concern right now. She jumps up, touching her face and wondering if she's still dreaming. A knock on the door startles her. She's scared it might be him. A voice asks to come in, and she recognizes it as the doctor's. She tells her to enter. Chloe steps in and says she'll examine her now, asking for her permission. She agrees, and Chloe removes the bandages, mentioning how well her healing spell worked. The word spell makes her pause, but she doesn't interrupt. Chloe asks if she remembers anything yet, and when she says no, the doctor reintroduces herself, explaining that she's her personal doctor, assigned by Master Lex. She also explains that she's a pixie and can use various spells, including healing. The girl listens, confused, unable to recall anything. Chloe tells her not to force it, suggesting she take things slow. She hands her breakfast and advises her to eat, take a warm bath, and rest. Standing on the balcony later, she watches the snow fall and people pass by. She notices everyone down below has horns like Lex and thinks about how he might come back. The breakfast was good, but her mind is too full to enjoy it. She remembers Lex calling her his fiancé and decides she needs to run away. He's too terrifying to stay near. Out of nowhere, a stone flies past her face. Looking down, she sees demons throwing stones at her, calling her a fairy and mocking her. She's too stunned to move, fearing they'll hurt her. Suddenly, a hand grabs her from behind and pulls her inside. It's Lex. He shuts the door and kneels in front of her. "Are you okay?" he asks. She's sitting on the floor, curled up tightly, still trembling in fear. The next morning, she wakes up suddenly, thinking she's late for work. Then she remembers she doesn't even have a job anymore. She sighs, deciding to go back to sleep, but something snaps her out of it. She jumps up, realizing that work should be the least of her worries right now. She touches her face, wondering if this is all just a weird dream. A knock on the door interrupts her thoughts, making her heart race. What if it's him? The voice that follows is softer. It's the doctor's. Relieved, she tells her to come in. Chloe walks in and says it's time to examine her, asking if it's okay. She nods, and Chloe carefully removes the bandages, mentioning how powerful her healing spell is. The word spell catches her off guard, but she stays quiet. Chloe notices her confusion and asks if she remembers anything yet. When she shakes her head, Chloe introduces herself again, explaining she's her personal doctor assigned by Master Lex. She also mentions that she's a pixie with magical abilities like healing spells. The girl listens, completely lost, unable to recall anything. Chloe tells her not to stress about remembering everything at once and suggests taking things slow. She gives her breakfast, advising her to eat, take a warm bath, and rest. The kindness eases her nerves a bit, and she feels grateful for Chloe's calm demeanor. Later, she steps onto the balcony on the second floor, watching the snow fall. The cold bites at her, but she tells herself she'll head back inside soon. She looks down at the street and notices that everyone walking by has horns, just like Lex. Her thoughts drift to him. He's bound to show up again. She tries to focus on the food Chloe brought. It tastes good, but her mind won't let her enjoy it. Lex calling her his fiancé keeps replaying in her head. She decides it's all too much. Running away might be her only option. Suddenly, a stone whizzes past her face. Startled, she looks down and sees a group of demons throwing stones at her, calling her the fairy from yesterday. They laugh as they aim for her again. Fear freezes her in place as she wonders if they'll hurt her. Before she can react, a hand grabs her from behind and pulls her inside. It's Lex. He looks her over quickly and asks if she's okay. Shaken, she sits on the floor, hugging her knees tightly, trembling from both fear and shock. She asks him why they're attacking her. He tells her that they're people who despise witches and pixies, but assures her that he'll send soldiers to deal with them. He tells her not to open the door again and, as he walks away, says he'll be back soon. She watches him go. He's scary, but at least he seems nicer than the people outside. Taking Chloe's advice, she decides to calm down. Stepping into the bathroom, she can't help but admire its elegance. Everything is so detailed, so luxurious, and it makes her feel a little calmer. She sinks into the warm water, letting the soothing heat relax her. It's the first time in a while she feels like she can breathe. As she leans back, her mind starts to piece things together. She tries to remember when all of this started. The day she was fired from her job. She had reported a corruption scheme, thinking she was doing the right thing, but instead, she lost everything. Then, the attack. Someone had stabbed her, and she had been certain she was going to die. But somehow, here she is, alive and in this strange new place. And Lex, he had told her she was his fiancé. She still can't wrap her head around that. He also mentioned her helping him kill evildoers. The more she thinks about it, the more confused she becomes. Deciding to stop overthinking, she lets it go for now. There's no logic to any of this, and trying to make sense of it is giving her a headache. For now, she just wants to relax in the bath. There are still so many questions in her mind. How did she even end up here? What's her next step? How does she get back to her world? And even if she does, will they just try to kill her again? She's unemployed, no job to return to. Nothing. Everything feels like it's spiraling out of control, and she has no idea how to fix it. Suddenly, the door creaks open. Her heart skips a beat. Lex steps in, looking calm as usual. He glances at her and says he's glad she's still here, his voice a little softer than before. She's shocked that he just walked in like that. She immediately starts splashing water at him, telling him to leave. He tries to calm her down, explaining why he's there, but she doesn't want to listen. She keeps splashing him, shouting for him to go away. Now drenched, he grabs her hand and asks if she got him all wet so he would bathe with her. She quickly says no. He's still holding her hand, and she gets so nervous she starts shivering. He notices and lets go. He tells her her reaction is making him sad. Despite how she's reacting, he says he's still going to finish his bath since she got him all wet. He starts undressing. She can't believe what she's seeing and immediately turns away, covering her eyes. She asks why he's taking his clothes off in front of her. He casually replies that she's already used to seeing it. This is just the first time she's seeing it up close. She remembers seeing it online, but this is way different. He notices she's still covering her eyes and tells her she'll have to get used to it. She insists she can't. Procents. Standing up from the tub, she says she's going to change in her room and warns him not to try to follow. He agrees as she walks away, wrapping a towel around herself. After some time, he walks into the room. She's already dressed, but he's still wrapped in a towel. She asks why he hasn't changed yet. He reminds her that his clothes are soaked because of her. She suggests he wear something else instead. As she sits down, she starts complaining about her situation, blaming everything on him, the male lead. She talks about feeling trapped and how she's sure she'll be eaten alive and die in this strange place. He overhears her and laughs at her dramatic take on what he said the day before. She turns to him annoyed and asks if he finds her fear funny. He's calm now and explains that she misunderstood him. When he said eating her, he didn't mean it the way she thought. Before she can process his words, he leans in and kisses her. Suddenly, she understands what he meant, but she's not ready for this. She pulls back and asks him to stop. She tells him that she doesn't know him and isn't comfortable with it. He steps back, sadness in his eyes, and asks how long she plans to keep her distance. She looks at him, noticing the sorrow on his face. He starts to walk away, giving her space. She feels a pang of sympathy for him. He seems to genuinely care for her in this world, but she's still confused. She doesn't know him and doesn't know how to handle any of this. He turns to her and introduces himself. He's the Demon King, Alexander Thammuz, but he tells her to call him Lex. She's surprised by the sudden introduction, but tells him her name is Lily Astor. He already knows that, of course. He then tells her she's his fiancé, which shocks her. She's been single for 28 years in her previous world and can't believe she suddenly has a fiancé here. She chides herself, thinking she can't be proud of that, especially since her so-called fiancé is a demon. She asks him why she should marry him. He tells her there are many reasons, but the most important one is that he needs her to help cleanse the demon realm of evil. He explains that he wants to change the image people have of demons, who are often seen as nothing but evil. He adds that he wants his realm to be free of that evil. As he speaks, she realizes they share the same view. He continues, saying that she used to have a spell that could detect evil before it happened. She's surprised. She can't believe her ears. He tells her she had a lot of powerful spells at her disposal. He asks if she remembers how to cast the most basic one, but she says no. He's not surprised and tells her it would have taken a long time to master, and then, just as she did, they attacked her. He believes she needs to start learning magic from scratch since she's forgotten everything. She's starting to understand little by little. She asks if she was attacked because she tried to make the country better. He confirms that. She sees the similarities. It's just like her old world. She tells him she hates evil too and offers her help. It would be nice to use a spell like that. There was no magic in her old world, so here would be totally different, a new experience. She says she has to be able to use that spell again. He's glad they share the same opinion, at least in that regard. He smiles and tells her there's another important thing she needs to know. Their wedding is in a week. This news shocks her. She agrees that she hates evildoers, so she'll gladly help him, but she thinks they're moving too fast. She says they don't need to get married just yet. He looks at her, almost in disbelief. He tells her the wedding has been planned for a long time, so it wouldn't be appropriate to delay it any further. He then adds that there's another reason they should marry. He has a ring that can protect her, but it can only be used once they're married. He continues, telling her that even though she doesn't remember him or love him, the marriage must still happen. Holding her hand, he says he doesn't want to see her hurt again. She looks at him, speechless, and says she has a lot of questions but doesn't even know where to begin. He tells her she can ask anything. First, she asks who she is. He tells her she's a pixie. She asks again if demons can marry someone like her. He answers yes, there are many interracial marriages. She raises a concern about their size difference, and he smiles, reassuring her not to worry. He tells her they've done it before. She's confused and says she doesn't understand. He tries to explain, but she refuses to agree. "I've never done it before," she says. He kisses her hair and expresses how grateful he is that she's still alive. He confesses he can't live without her. Holding her face, he says that despite everything, how she acts and expresses herself hasn't changed, even though she must have forgotten. She likes the way he's being kind, but suddenly he becomes furious. "Losing your memory is something I can never forgive," he says. He adds that he's already taken the life of the person who hurt her. She looks at him, feeling a chill, and starts to feel less impressed with his kindness. Now he's starting to look scary. She doesn't believe he actually killed them. "Wasn't that too harsh?" she asks. He tells her there's no mercy for anyone who tries to harm her. She still doesn't think it was the right call, believing there must have been another way to punish them. He remains firm, saying his actions were justified. She asks who the people were, wondering if she knew them. "Did I do something wrong?" she asks. He assures her that she didn't do anything wrong, explaining that the person who attacked her was a follower of the old order. He goes on to explain that the old demonic order taught that if you wanted something, you had to take it by force. But ever since his father took over, the law changed. Most citizens prefer the new order because it brought peace, and it focuses more on cooperation with other races. However, some people were dissatisfied with the change, so they formed their own group. That group targeted her because she's a pixie, she uses spells, and she's his fiancé. He tells her to stay put and not go anywhere until their wedding day, promising he'll protect her with everything he has. He becomes tired and stops, saying he wants to rest. He hasn't slept in 3 days because he's been searching for the person who hurt her. Lying down, he says he'll rest today. She asks why he's lying on her bed. He reminds her that it's also his room. She tells him they're not married yet. He looks at her, puzzled, wondering why she's being so stubborn. He says they've always slept together before, and he promised to protect her. She replies that she doesn't want to sleep with him. He's taken off his shirt again, which makes her uncomfortable. Deciding she'd rather sleep on the sofa, she starts to get up, but he grabs her hand and drags her closer. She struggles, not liking it. He tells her the more she struggles, the tighter he'll hold her. She asks why he's forcing her and what he would do if she told him she doesn't remember anything about him and has never lived in this world. He's shocked. She goes on, telling him that she doesn't belong here, that she was just a regular employee. She explains that she reported a corrupt scheme at her office, got fired, and was attacked. When she woke up, he sits up, thinking. He tells her that her storybooks must have gotten mixed up in her head. She insists she's telling the truth. Frustrated, she knows he won't believe her, and she had a feeling telling him wouldn't make a difference. He tries to make sense of the scenario she described about her old world. He says that since she got hurt because of her attitude, she should marry him. She looks at him, thinking it over. It seems like he really does care for her. It's not like she hates him either. Sure, he looks scary, but he's also quite handsome. And his body is seriously muscular and tan. He snaps her out of her thoughts. He says her eyes are practically stabbing him, asking if she remembers anything from the way she stared at him. She says no, she was just thinking, and apologizes for making him feel forgotten. He's surprised and reminds her that she's his fiancé. She says she knows, but she's just worried because she can't remember anything. He smiles and hugs her, telling her that the most important thing is that she's still alive. He held her tightly and refused to let go, saying he wouldn't risk her getting hurt again. She complained he didn't need to touch her to protect her, but he ignored her protests. She accused him of being angry because she couldn't use magic or recognize him. He calmly replied that he wasn't angry, just sad she had forgotten everything, but he promised to help her remember and make her fall for him again. When she asked what he meant by continuing to do what they'd always done, he leaned closer, teasing her. She panicked and said she didn't want to know. Amused, he laid her down, tucked her under the blanket, and told her to sleep. She protested that it was still bright out, but he insisted she should stay and keep him company while he rested. When she pointed out she'd never shared a bed with a man before, he casually replied she'd get used to it. Removing her hairpin, he reminded her to stay warm. She noticed his lack of a shirt and questioned it. He explained he always felt hot, even in winter, which was why he didn't bother buttoning his shirts properly either. She didn't bother responding, telling him good night instead. He sighed, disappointed she didn't have more questions, out, and she rolled her eyes under the blanket, already regretting agreeing to this arrangement. 15 minutes later, she was still wide awake. After all, she'd already slept too much the day before. Even with the blanket wrapped tightly around her, she felt cold. He noticed her trembling and asked what was wrong, startling her. She thought he was asleep. He admitted that with everything on his mind, sleeping wasn't so easy. She told him to turn off the AC. He looked confused and asked what she meant. When she explained, he chuckled, saying there wasn't any AC in this world. She sighed and said she just felt really cold. He smiled and told her it was because she was so small, adding that when she got cold before, she'd hug his arm while he held her close to keep her warm. Without thinking, she grabbed his arm. He blinked, surprised, as she snuggled against it. He was so warm, reminding her of the giant teddy bear she had back home. But then she stopped herself. She couldn't talk about her past life. She quickly backtracked, claiming she just remembered a doll from her memory. She asked him if she'd ever had one before. He told her she hadn't, which made her feel awkward. Turning her back to him, she wondered why she'd even hugged him in the first place. He reassured her, saying that if she remembered anything, no matter how small, she should tell him. It might be important. She agreed, and he hugged her gently, telling her to get some rest. 3 years ago, in what felt like a dream, she saw herself in a room with him. He asked if she was sad, but she shook her head and said she was happy to be with him. She added that she didn't feel alone anymore, which made him look genuinely surprised. Holding her face, he asked if she realized what it meant to share a room with him. His voice carried a playful warning as he said he wouldn't be able to stop himself from touching her. She laughed, brushing off his teasing, and said it was fine, since she loved him. He raised an eyebrow, asking if she had any other thoughts in mind. She fired back that he was the one thinking like that. She glanced around the room, taking in the dark and heavy decor. She casually mentioned that it needed some changes, something brighter, more her style. He told her it was her room too, so she could do as she liked. Still smiling, she assured him she'd always feel at ease as long as they were together. But then he asked if she wasn't bothered by how she ended up there, how he had essentially kidnapped her. She froze for a moment, visibly shaken. When he asked if she was okay, she claimed she was just tired. He didn't press further and suggested they rest. Leading her to the bed, he reminded her again, this was her space now, too. She's shocked to hear she'll actually be sharing a room with him. He confirms it, saying it's to keep her under his protection. She teases him, asking why it has to be him. He grins and replies that it's because he loves her, and because he doesn't want her escaping. Without waiting for another word, he picks her up and carries her to the bed. She insists she's not planning to run away, but he just smirks and suggests they take a bath first. In the bathroom, she finds herself scrubbing his back. His broad back feels like an endless canvas, and she can't help but complain about how much work it takes. He'd told her earlier that she didn't need to help, but she'd insisted. Leaning against him briefly, she feels the warmth of his skin and tells him they should focus on the kingdom first. There's too much chaos right now to think about anything else. He nods, agreeing, but adds that once things settle down, he plans to marry her. As they finish up, he yawns and suggests heading to bed. He's clearly exhausted, and she agrees, eager to rest after the long day. Later, lying on the bed, she gets comfortable, enjoying the soft blankets. Just as she's about to drift off, he leans over and kisses her. Startled, she reminds him he said he was sleepy. He smirks and admits that whenever she's beside him, sleep becomes impossible. He confesses he can't wait for her to become his wife. She tells him to be patient, it'll happen soon enough. But his impatience shows as he draws closer, starting to get a little too intimate. She jolts awake, heart racing. It takes her a moment to realize it was all just a dream. Everything had felt so vivid. The warmth, the closeness, the kisses. She shakes her head, trying to push the memory away. Looking over, she sees him still asleep beside her. Her cheeks flush as she remembers that, while they're sharing a bed, nothing had actually happened. She sits up and watches him briefly. He looks utterly exhausted, and she remembers he hadn't slept for 3 days while searching for her attacker. Deciding not to stare too long, she gets up and stretches. Her mind wanders to the upcoming wedding, only a few days away. She sighs, realizing she doesn't have much of a choice. It's her reality now. But she needs a distraction, anything to keep her thoughts away from the looming marriage. She tries to remember what she used to do to relax after work in her old life. Slowly, bits and pieces come back to her. Hobbies, routines, little joys. Maybe she could bring some of that into this new world. Anything to help her feel a little more like herself. She dismisses her ideas as unrealistic and heads to the wardrobe, hoping to find something interesting. She spots beautiful dresses and wonders if they're all hers, still amazed even though she'd seen them before. She checks the next wardrobe and finds brooms and cleaning supplies. Amused, she assumes he must like cleaning too. Deciding to pass time, she plans to clean the room, but changes into practical clothes first, settling for something short and tight. Relieved that he's still asleep, she begins cleaning. Hours later, the room shines. As she's putting the cleaning supplies away, she accidentally kicks over a bucket of water. Panicking, she raises her hands, and the water freezes solid. He wakes up, asking about the noise. She hesitates, confused by what just happened. He points out that her magic still works. She denies it, saying it was an accident. He encourages her to try again, bringing water for her to practice with. She reluctantly attempts, but nothing happens. He laughs, saying she just needs practice. Annoyed, she says it's impossible and insists the first time was a fluke. He tells her she used to do this often. She dismisses his claim, joking that if she could control ice, she'd freeze him for laughing. He quickly stops, but the amused look on his face remains. He asks why she's wearing those clothes, calling it a school uniform. Surprised, she explains she didn't realize it was a uniform and only picked it because it had a short skirt, which made cleaning easier. She tells him she wanted to keep busy and loves cleaning. He smiles, saying her love for cleaning hasn't changed, and adds that she even stored cleaning supplies in the wardrobe herself. Shocked, she can't believe it was her doing. He offers to get her more short skirts if she wants, but she quickly refuses, asking instead for sewing equipment and fabrics. Amused, he leads her to a closet filled with needles, threads, and fabrics she had apparently hoarded before. As she sorts through the supplies, she thinks about sewing clothes inspired by her old world, princess-like dresses she loved from Sunday cartoons, but also comfortable everyday outfits. Grinning, he says if she makes short skirts, but she'd better wear them only in their room. He wraps his arms around her, teasing that her school uniform looks even more attractive on her now, probably because it fits tightly in certain areas. She pushes him away, flustered, insisting she's never been comfortable wearing short skirts outside anyway. He feels relieved and claims he's the only one allowed to see her in outfits like that. He's still holding her and jokingly wonders if part of her body grew bigger since the uniform looks so snug. She scolds him to stop, but he laughs and says her voice is too sweet, warning her he could pounce at any moment. Embarrassed and uncomfortable, she tries to pull away. Suddenly, his stomach growls loudly, breaking the tension. Trying to save face, he stands up, announcing he'll ask the servants to bring food. She raises an eyebrow and teases him, saying, "For someone who claims to be dangerous, your biggest weakness seems to be an empty stomach." She tells him she'll go take a bath first. He smirks and asks if she wants him to join her. She quickly shuts him down, saying he's not allowed in the bathroom without her permission. He teases her, telling her to lock the door then. She agrees, but suddenly remembers the lock is too high for her to reach. Embarrassed, she begs him to stop teasing. He laughs and says it's hard to stop when she's so beautiful. Later, as they eat, she takes a bite and comments that the food is amazing. He grins proudly, claiming it should be since they have the best cooks in the world. She studies him, her gaze lingering, making him pause. He asks if something's wrong. She tilts her head and asks if he's really a king. Confused, he nods and asks why she's questioning it. She chuckles, pointing out how unkingly he seems, sitting on the floor to eat, licking his fingers and acting so casual. He laughs, clearly amused, and says he doesn't need to act formal when it's just the two of them. If it bothers her, though, he promises to try being more kingly. She shakes her head, saying there's no need. It's his home, and he should feel comfortable. She's just a guest. As she watches him, she thinks he acts more like a mafia boss than a king. He catches her expression and chuckles, admitting he wouldn't have chosen to be king if he'd had a choice. Being a regular citizen would have been easier. Taking care of people, he says, can be exhausting, but then he smirks and adds, "Luckily, I'm not the kind of king who licks boots, just my fingers." He looks at her and asks if she knows what his greatest wish is. Curious, she asks him. Smiling, he tells her that his dream is to live with her in a quiet rural village, raising lots of children together. He adds that she was the one who wanted him to become king, so he could make the kingdom and the world a better place. Holding her hands, he promises to fulfill that dream, protect her, and make her happy. Even if she's forgotten, he hasn't. He hands her a book, explaining it's about the history of pixies and might help jog her memory. She takes it and promises to give it a try. Changing the subject, she asks about his plans for the day. He shrugs, saying he'll mostly laze around. Surprised, she asks why he isn't working. Grinning, he says he's technically on marriage leave, though some tasks, like finding the one who hurt her, still require his attention. She quickly changes the topic, not wanting to think about punishment or killing, and asks what she can do to help with the wedding. He assures her everything's already prepared, as they started planning long before she lost her memory. All she has to do is wait. Still curious, she asks him to explain the event. He agrees, breaking it all down for her step by step. Later, she starts reading the book, but only gets through the first page. It reads like a fantasy novel, and she can't believe something like this could exist. She wonders if this world is even real. Noticing her tired expression, he asks if it's too much for her. She admits it's overwhelming. He tells her not to push herself if it's too hard, and she agrees. Looking at the cover, she asks if she ever had wings like the pixie in the illustration. He laughs softly, telling her, "Not exactly, but you always had a way of making people believe you could fly." He tells her he's not surprised she asked about the wings. The atmosphere in the room suddenly feels heavy. She quickly adds that if the question makes him uncomfortable, he doesn't have to answer. He agrees, holding his head in his hands, the question reminding him of a terrible accident, one that was entirely his fault. His mood darkens. She tells him not to worry about her question. Though she doesn't believe she ever had wings, she doesn't really remember how it would feel to have them, so it doesn't matter. Before the conversation can continue, a knock on the door interrupts them. A voice from the other side apologizes for disturbing her rest, introducing themselves as Kenzo and Arion, saying they have something important to report to him. The male lead scratches his head, realizing his holiday has ended. He asks her who they are, then remembers she doesn't remember them either. He tells her to come along so he can introduce them again. He opens the door, and the two men stand outside. They comment that they weren't expecting the door to open so soon. Both of them bow deeply, greeting him respectfully. He tells them he hopes they've come with good news. Arion, the one with green hair, says they bring both good and bad news. The male lead asks for the bad news first. Arion explains that the bad news is that the male lead must go with them, while Kenzo will stay and keep watch. Then he moves on to the good news. Their task here will be quick, only taking an hour or two. The male lead scratches his head, saying he'll go prepare himself. Then he remembers he needs to introduce her to them. He tells her to come along so he can make the introductions. He first introduces her to Kenzo, the one with brown hair. Kenzo greets her and comments that she's even more beautiful up close. He introduces himself, mentioning he's 18 and has been here for a year, though he only joined this division a few weeks ago. She notices he's younger than her but very tall. He extends his hand for a handshake. He tells her that he heard she's suffering from amnesia, but that they've never met before. He's happy to finally meet her. The male lead looks furious and asks what Kenzo is trying to do. Kenzo quickly pulls his hand back and apologizes, explaining that he's a big fan of the male lead, so he's also a fan of the people he cares about. The male lead warns him not to touch her again or he'll be fired. Kenzo apologizes profusely. He then introduces Arion to her. Arion greets her, saying they've actually met before, though she's forgotten. He continues, explaining that he's been the male lead's advisor and guardian since he was a child, and he's seen her when she was younger as well. This surprises her. She notices that Arion doesn't have any horns like the others, and while he's still tall, his body isn't as big. He tells her he's an elf, though he has some demonic traits because of his lineage. She asks if he's older than the male lead, since he mentioned watching over him as a child. He replies that he's 7 years older than the male lead. She finds this hard to believe. He then adds with a smile that he's even had to clean up after the male lead when he was a kid. The male lead defends himself, saying it's a lie and that she shouldn't believe Arion. Our girl looks at both of them. Arion looks much younger than the male lead, and she wonders why the male lead needs guards when he's clearly much bigger than both of them. He announces that he's the strongest one there, so he doesn't truly need guards. But he says his guards are also her guards, and they're there to protect her when he can't be by her side. He tells them he'll go prepare. He's dressed and ready. He comes to her room to inform her that he's leaving. He says Kenzo will stand guard outside her room, so she should stay inside. She agrees. He asks if she wants him to bring more books. She tells him to do so, as she has nothing else to do and more books would be nice. He moves closer and tells her that he really doesn't want to go. Even though she's guarded, he's still worried about her safety. He kisses her, and she tells him to stop. He teases her, saying it's just a kiss. As he walks away, he says he'll be right back and advises her to take care of herself. She watches him leave, her heart racing. He tells Kenzo at the door to protect his fiancé. As he leaves with Arion, she watches them go. Normally, she'd feel relieved, but instead, it's as if she's lost something. She tells Kenzo she's going back to her room. He tells her to have a good rest. Just then, a maid calls out to Kenzo, saying he's needed in the servants' room. He feels reluctant and says he's assigned to her room, but the maid insists there's no time. She tells him to go, saying she'll protect our girl. Kenzo agrees and quickly leaves, apologizing to her as he goes. The maid tells her to go back to the room. As our girl turns to leave, the maid pulls out a rod and is about to strike her. They're in a dark place. 2 people are talking about the female lead. A female voice asks if they're sure they've got the right person. A male voice answers, saying yes, she's the male lead's fiancé. Our girl slowly starts to wake up. The female voice adds that she knows the person they have is the male lead's fiancé, but since she's lost her memory, she's unsure if she can still perform the task. The male voice reassures her that it's just her memory that's gone. She'll still be able to cast her spells. Our girl fully wakes up, confused. Who are these people? What's happening? She tries to move but realizes her arms and legs are tied. The man looks in her direction and says she's awake. The maid, who was supposed to protect her earlier, is standing nearby, and the man is behind bars, looking like the male lead. He demands that she get him out of there immediately, now that she's awake. She's still confused, and the maid explains that her spell is needed to open the cells, and she's the only one who can do it. Our girl tries to process the information. The man tells her to stop playing dumb and release him. He warns her that no matter how loud she screams, no one will hear her. This is the deepest part of the dungeon, where even the guards rarely go. She insists she can't use magic. The maid reminds the man that she's lost her memories. The man asks if the maid is taking the girl's side. Our girl replies that even if she remembered, she wouldn't free him, since he must have been locked up for doing something evil. The man's face twists with anger as he orders the maid to bring her closer. Our girl's heart races with fear as she's dragged toward him. She has no idea what he's planning, and that terrifies her. He grabs her chin roughly, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. His voice is cold as he tells her she's nothing but a nuisance, just like the male lead. Then, with a smirk, he adds that at least she's beautiful. He wonders aloud how the male lead would react if he kissed her. Our girl stares at him, terrified. Suddenly, a strange light begins to glow above her head. The man's expression shifts to confusion as he watches the light above her. He steps back slightly and demands to know what she's done to him. She's just as confused and reminds him that she doesn't even know how to use magic. Before he can react further, there's a swift movement, and something slices him from behind her. It's the male lead's sword, and he looks absolutely furious. His voice is sharp as he asks the man if he really has a death wish. Our girl quickly steps back, away from the scene as the man's blood starts to spill. She watches in shock, wondering if he's dead, her mind racing to keep up with what just happened. The male lead's anger is still evident. He turns to the maid and asks if she's the one who brought our girl here. The maid, visibly scared, asks for forgiveness, saying the man threatened her. He's not listening and tells her she'll have to die too. Our girl, still on the floor, begs him not to kill her. He tells her the maid put her in danger, so she deserves to die. But our girl insists the maid was only acting under threat, so she shouldn't be killed. The male lead still doesn't seem convinced. He asks her if she can really trust someone who tried to hurt her. He tells her to stay away if she doesn't want to witness what will happen next. She keeps begging him, trying to move, but her legs are still bound. She struggles, but it's no use. Slowly, she feels her strength slipping away. Her body feels heavy, and her vision starts to blur. She falls to the ground. This alarms the male lead, and he rushes to her side. She feels so tired and cold as if her body is freezing. He gently holds her face, and she feels his warmth. For a brief moment, she feels like she's holding her doll. Suddenly, she wakes up. She's in bed, surprised to see that it was the male lead's hand that was so warm. She finds herself in the room, lying on the bed. The male lead is standing above her, watching with a relieved look on his face. He's happy that she's awake. She asks him what happened to her, and he tells her that she was unconscious and cold for 2 days after the incident. She's surprised. He decides to go and get the doctor. After a while of examination, the doctor explains that she unleashed a spell when her body wasn't stable yet, which is why she passed out. She decides to give her vitamins to help her recover her strength and informs her that her body is still too cold. She should eat warm meals and drink warm fluids to help her recover. Our girl wonders why she gets so cold easily when she can use ice spells. The male lead tells her that she's always been like this, even before everything happened. The doctor suggests he help warm her up, and the male lead agrees. The doctor leaves. They're left alone, and our girl asks him how he knew she was in the dungeon. He shows her her hairpin, explaining that he found it on the floor, far from her room. Then he saw strange eyes appearing on the walls. When he got closer to the dungeon, he saw more ice, so he figured she'd be there. She asks about the 2 people in the dungeon, and he tells her that the man was killed. He adds that the man deserved it, and he would gladly get his hands dirty if it meant a brighter future for the kingdom. He also tells her that the girl escaped, mentioning that she'd only been here for a few months, but already knew all the shortcuts. He offers her a drink, telling her to take it, as she's not just going to be a queen, but his wife too. Anyone who tries to hurt her deserves to die. She takes the drink and silently begins to sip it. He continues, saying that he was so worried something bad might happen to her. He starts to come closer to her, but then stops, saying that she needs to regain her strength first. Deciding to spoon-feed her, he insists. She protests, saying she doesn't want him to do that. After she finishes eating, he asks how she's feeling. She replies that she's okay and then asks about Kenzo. She wonders if there was really a problem in the servant's room that day. He tells her no, the maid lied, and that's why he punished Kenzo for being careless enough to let her get kidnapped. She doesn't like it and begs him to free Kenzo, insisting that he didn't do anything wrong. He tells her that no matter what she says, the punishment is final. She insists that she'll go and meet him, but he laughs and tells her she doesn't even know where he's being kept. She says she'll find him anyway. Getting annoyed, he comments that she's becoming stubborn. He feels it's too dangerous for her to go alone and decides to take her there. They arrive at the room where Kenzo is being kept. When Kenzo sees them, he prostrates himself and begs for forgiveness. She looks at him with compassion and tells him it's not his fault. He comments on her kindness and then realizes she called him Ken. He's touched by her gesture. She tells him to lift his head. The male lead tells Kenzo that he will still have to face his punishment. Kenzo replies that he'll gladly accept it. Our girl tries to intervene, but the male lead is firm. He believes Kenzo needs to be punished so he won't be careless in the future. Kenzo tells her it's all right and that he'd feel guilty if he wasn't punished at all. He admits it's his fault for being so careless. The male lead holds her and tells her they should go back to her room, saying she shouldn't leave until after their marriage. Our girl agrees, thinking that the incident the other day really scared her, and staying in her room feels like the best choice for now. We see the Demon King Lex cleaning his hair. He just came out of the shower and is trying to dry up. He says to our girl, who is Lily, if she is finished putting on her clothes, right? She sits with a pink gown and says, yeah. He removes his towel, and she grumbles. She asks why is he remaining undressed, and he says that he is soaked because of her. She tells him to quickly put on something else. She shields her eyes and says that she is really at a loss because of all of them. Erg, they attacked her, and now he's going to eat her. She's still going to die here. He says, huh? Eat you? Die? He snickers and she frowns, saying that it's funny to him, huh? Amidst his laughter, he says that what he meant the other day definitely wasn't that. He tells her by eating her, he didn't mean killing her. He hugs her and kisses her cheek. He says that by eating her, he didn't mean to kill her. Then he kisses her cheek and she thinks that so this is what he meant by eating her? But she still doesn't want this. He should please not do that. He lays her down onto bed while she trembles. She cries and says that she really doesn't know him, and please, she is sorry. She trembles and he sheds a tear. He tells her that if she's putting on that face, so how long is she going to stay like this? She thinks to herself that he looks so damned sad. He says whatever and turns away. She thinks that it seems Lex really loved her in this world, but what can she do? She really doesn't know anything about him. He turns to her and says, listen up, and she perks up at his voice. He says that he is the Demon King. His name is Alexander Thamus. She should call him Lex. She wonders that he suddenly introduced himself. She says that her name is Lile Aster. He says, yeah, he knows that, and she huffs in annoyance. He says that she is his fiancé. She thinks fiancé. After being single for 23 years in her previous world, she should have a fiancé here. Wait, this isn't the time to be feeling proud. He's a demon. She asks why should she marry him anyway. He says there are 1001 reasons she should be marrying him, but most importantly, he needs her to cut down evil in the demon's realm. Demons are identical with evil, right? He's aiming to change that image. He wants this country to be cleansed of all evil. She echoes his words in her head and thinks that he and she share the same view. He gestures that she had a spell detect evil before it even took place. She asks that she had a cool spell like that. He says that sure, she has a lot of cool spells, but does she remember how to cast the most basic spell? She looks confused and says no. He says if she doesn't, she needed a long time to master that spell. And when you finally mastered it, they finally attacked her. So now she forgot everything, in fact. She has to start learning magic from the very beginning. She says that so she was attacked because she tried changing this country for the better? He says correct. She thinks that it's just like in her old world. She says that she hates evil too. Let her help him too. She thinks that there was no magic in her old world, and here she actually had a spell like that. She says that she has to be able to use that spell again. He chuckles and says that good. So they have the same opinion on this. At least this attitude of hers hasn't changed. He thinks how cute. She says that, oh, and something just as important, they'll be wed in a week from now. She says, huh? Wait, she does hate evildoers too. So she can help him, but they don't need to get married, right? Doesn't he think he's being too hasty? He says that they've long since planned this. They can't delay it any further. Another reason she should marry him is that he has a ring that can protect her, and he can only be used once she's become his wife. Even though she doesn't remember him, even though she doesn't even love him, the marriage must still go through. He doesn't want to see her getting hurt again. He grabs her hand and caresses her hand. She hums as her heart beats faster. Then she says questions, but she has no idea what she should ask first. He tells her to ask anything. She says that she's not a demon, right? He says that she's a pixie. She says that, can demons get married to pixies? He leads them to a bed where he says, sure, there are lots of interracial marriages. She shouldn't worry. She says, but the difference in their size is kinda, and she pauses. He laughs and says, so that's what she's worried about. She should relax. They've done it before. She asks, what does he mean? He tells her the first time they did it was actually when she moved here. She says, what? She hasn't done it before. He says that it looks like he should be grateful. He kisses her hair and says, thank goodness she's still alive here with him. He just can't live without her. She may have forgotten, but how she acts and expresses herself hasn't changed a bit. He caresses her face and she thinks, oh, so he can be sweet too. He then says darkly that she's losing her memories is something that can never be forgiven. He shouldn't worry. She already took the life of the one that injured her. She thinks that no, he's not sweet at all. He's scary. She tells him to wait a second and that he means he killed them. Isn't that too harsh? He makes a confused sound at her antics. He says that there is no mercy for anyone that dares to harm her. She says that, but still, couldn't he have punished them any other way? He says nope. So who attacked her? She says that, does she know them? Did she do something wrong? He tell her that she wasn't in the wrong. The culprit was a follower of the old order. In a nutshell, the old demonic order says that if she wants something, she must obtain it through violence. He says that ever since his father started to rule, this law was no longer in effect. A lot more citizens prefer the new order effort the peace it brought. And this new order puts more emphasis on cooperation with other races. Of course, some are dissatisfied with the decision. Thus, the dissatisfied ones are gathered to form a group of their own. That group targeted her simply because she is a pixie. She can use spells, and also she's his fiancé. She wears an anxious expression as she stares at him with blue and green eyes. He says, got it? So just stay here and don't go anywhere until the day of their wedding arrives. He'll definitely protect her with all he has. She swallows at his words. He sighs and turns away from her and says, that's enough for now. He's tired. He hasn't slept in 3 days looking for the one who hurt her. He says that today's he's just going to laze around. She asks, why is he sleeping here? He lies down and says, why not? This is his room too. She argues that, but they're not married yet, right? He says, so what? They've always slept together before. He also said earlier that he's going to protect her. She says that, but she doesn't want to sleep together. She thinks, why did he take off his clothes again? She says that she'll just sleep on the sofa. He pulls her to him, and she falls on top of him, saying that she should sleep with him. She argues that she doesn't want to. He holds her to himself and says that the harder she struggles around, the tighter he's hugging her. She asks him why is he forcing her. She asks him what would he do if she told him that she doesn't have any memories of him and she's never lived in this world before. He makes a confused sound. She says that she doesn't belong in this world. She was just a normal employee. She reported a corrupt plot in her office and she got fired, and then they attacked her. When she came to, she was already in this world where she met him. He says that those storybooks she often read must have gotten mixed into her head. She says that it's the truth. she thinks that she knew that there is no use telling him about it. He then says, but from what he understands, she got hurt because she unraveled the truth, right? She says, yeah. He says that attitude of hers didn't go away. That's why she should marry him. She thinks that it looks like he truly loves her. Honestly, it's not like she hates him either. She means he looks scary, but he's actually quite handsome too. His body is pretty muscular and tanned, like a really puffy bread. He says that her eyes are stabbing right through him. She makes a confused noise. He says that something came up in her mind while she's staring at him. Does she remember him now? She says no. She was just thinking. She's sorry for making her fiancé forget about him. She asks, what is she saying? She is his fiancée. She says that she knows, but he interrupts her and pulls her closer and says, what's important is that she's still alive. He caresses her and she gulps. She pleads with him to let her go. He says nope. Last time he let her go, she got hurt. She says no, can he at least not touch her? He pauses and then says nope. Is he mad at her because now that she can't use any magic, she is no longer useful to him? He says that no, he's not mad at him. She can still help him, even without magic. Besides, she can learn spells any day, but her memories. She says, but she's mad at her because she doesn't recognize him, right? He assures her that he's not angry. He's just sad. He touches her hair and says that he wishes her memories would return. He says how painful it is, knowing that only he can remember everything they've experienced together. But he won't ever give up. He'll definitely make her remember, and then she'll fall for him all over again. She blushes at his words and he pulls her closer as he says that he'll keep her safe. But even if she doesn't remember him, he'll still keep doing what he's always done with her. She asks, what's that? And she thinks that she has a bad feeling. He chuckles and asks her if she really wants to know. She says on second thought. He says that he's just going to warn her. Be prepared, he can prey on her at any time. He grins and she shivers in his hands. He says, come on, time to sleep. She argues that it's still bright out, and she spent all day sleeping yesterday. He says that she will fall asleep again sooner or later. At least she should keep him company while he sleeps. He says that this is the first time she's sleeping with a man. He tells her that, well, she's always sleeping with him starting today. Here, let him take off that hairpin. She should wear her blanket tight. She gets cold quite easily. She feels comfy under the covers. He says that it's also winter right now. She asks him that he is not wearing a blanket. He says that he doesn't need one, and he can walk around naked even in the winter's cold. He always feels hot even during winter's cold days. She asks if that's why he never buttons his clothes. He laughs and says, bullseye. Anything else she want to ask? She says good night and turns away from him. He says, too bad. 15 minutes went by. Our girl wakes up and realizes that she can't still sleep. Of course, she already slept plenty yesterday after all. Not just that, even with this blanket, she still feels really cold. He stares at her and asks her what's wrong. She says that she thought he was already asleep. He admits that it's hard to sleep with a lot going on in his mind. She asks him if he can turn off the AC. He asks, what's an AC? She says there's no AC here. She just feels really cold. Our female main shivers under her covers. He says that's because her small body makes it easier to get cold. When she's cold, she'd usually hug his arm tight while he hugs her body. He always feels warm and she always felt cold. So they suit each other, doesn't she think? She turns on the bed to hug his hand and he blushes at the act as his heart beats faster. She says that he's really warm, and now she's reminded of the huge teddy bear she had back home. It was big, but he's much bigger, of course. She thinks, wait, she shouldn't tell him about her past life, should she? Why did she grab his hand? Then she tells him that she means that she had a glimpse of that in her memory. Did she have a doll? He says actually she's never had any dolls. She says that she sees, so it's probably just her imagination. She thinks that she must have sounded weird to him. He says that if she suddenly remembers anything, no matter how outrageous it sounds, she should just tell him. He'll be glad to hear it, and it could even be a clue. She says all right. He snuggles to her and says they should sleep. In the night, they sleep soundly. 3 years ago, we see our girl standing with her mouth open in front of our guy. He asks her what's up and calls her Lily. She laughs nervously and says that it's nothing. She thinks she's just getting a bit tired. Our guy tells her that's true. They should rest soon. They walk into a bedroom, and our guy welcomes her to his room and says that from now on, it's her room as well. She removes her jacket and says that she's sharing room with him. He tells her it's so she will be within his protection at all times. He was also thinking they could do other things as well. She laughs and says that's just him. Since it's her room too, can she change the room's color to be a bit brighter? It's a bit ugly for her taste. He laughs and says sure, whatever makes her comfortable here. She says of course, she'll be comfortable. After all, she'll always be with him. He asks her, isn't she sad because he just kidnapped her from her home? Our girl says quite the contrary. She's happy because now she gets to be with him. She is no longer alone now. His heartbeat increases, and he caresses her cheek as he asks her, does she know what it means to share a room with him? He tells her that it means he won't be able to keep himself from touching her. She tells him that it's okay and she loves him after all. He asks, why is she? She says what? He tells her that he loves her more and she won't be able to escape from him. She says, and just who's going to run away? He says that they sure took a long journey. They should take a bath first. In the bath, our girl complained that his back is too wide and she is tired. He says that he told her that she didn't have to wash his back. She says that she's training to be a good wife. He says, ah, and gathers her into his arms. He says that he can't wait for her to become his wife. She says that there's no need to hurry. She'll patiently wait for the day. He says, well, he's the impatient one, and he wants her to marry him right away. He nuzzles her neck and she blushes. She says that, but for now the matters of the kingdom comes first. He replies that yes, once things have settled down a bit, he'll marry her. Then they kiss. Our girl wakes up in fright as thinks that was a dream, but it felt so real. It was so warm. She scolds her to stop recalling. Beside her, our male guy sleeps soundly. She realizes that she slept with him last night, but they didn't do anything weird. He looks really beat. And he did say he hadn't slept in 3 days to catch the one who attacked her. This is bad. She shouldn't look at him too much. We main girl with a defeated expression as she thinks that 6 days left until the marriage. She doesn't know what to do anymore. She can only accept her fate here. She should do something to distract her mind from the marriage. They should see what should she usually do when she's off from work? Browsing? There's no internet here. Watching some films? She doesn't have her laptop with her here. Sewing? Should she ask Lex for a sewing machine? Flower trending? There's no flowers in the room. Maybe there's something interesting in the wardrobe. She admires the dresses on hangers and thinks, whoa, what beautiful dresses. Does all of this really belong to her? She already saw it the other day, but it still amazes her. What about the wardrobe next to it? She opens the door and wonders, what's a broom? Floor cleaners? Didn't think Lex would put this stuff in his room. Maybe he likes cleaning. She realizes that, well, she does like cleaning too. Maybe she should clean things to pass the time. First, she should change. She needs normal clothes, not a dress. She needs something that's easy to move in. She rummages through her wardrobe to search for a casual attire. She finds one, but it's a short black gown with a corset and a tight bodice. She realizes the error in the clothing choice. She feels that she will embarrass herself if our main guy saw it. Good thing he's still asleep. She wraps her head in a bun and decides to start cleaning. She uses a rag to clean the mirrors and glass surfaces. A few hours later, she wipes sweat off her brows and she thinks, phew, all done, sparkling clean. She says that it's good her guy is still asleep. She'll put the cleaning tools back, then she'll go take a bath. As she walks to the bathroom, she kicks a bucket of water which tips over. She panics and thinks that she already cleaned up the floor. She stretches out her hand and a blue light comes out of her palms. The water turns to ice which shatters onto the floor. She screams what? The water instantly froze over. The Demon King Lex comes out grumbling, what's with all the noise? She stumbles over her words, unable to speak freely. She asks him in tears that, why did the water suddenly freeze? He tells her that her spells are coming back. She looks at her hand and says, spells? Did she really use one? He says that's ice magic was often used by her to attack the enemy. He asks her if she can do it again. She shrieks that no, that one was purely accidental. He asks her if she wants to try practicing. She asks practice? How? In a bathroom, our guy stands in a towel and watches our girl try to use her magic. She tries to turn the water into ice, but the water remains the same. She breaks into tears and says that it's not changing. He says that at least it looks like she hasn't lost her spells, she just can't control it right now. He wonders if he shouldn't laugh, but she looks so cute when she's trying hard like this. She says that was her first time doing it too. There's no way she can do it again. He hums. He says that he's been meaning to ask, and she says what? He asks, why is she wearing those clothes? That it's a school uniform. She grimaces and says this is a uniform? It was the only thing with a short skirt in the wardrobe, so she wanted to clean the room, so it'd be hard to do it with a long dress, right? He asks, why would she clean the room? They have servants for that. He says that he had nothing else to do. And besides, she loves to do cleanup, so she did it. He tells her that side of hers hasn't changed either. She even stored cleaning tools inside the wardrobe. She should follow him. She says, huh? She was the one who put the tools there. He tells her she sure did. He asks her if she wants some short skirts. He can buy them for her. She says, oh no, he doesn't have to. But if she may, could he please bring her sewing equipment and some fabrics here? He laughs and says, that's right, she could do that too. He opens a door and tells her that it's over here. He shows her fabrics and boxes. He says that needles and threads are in that box. She says, whoa, all of this belongs to her? Such pretty cloths. She thinks that now she wants to sew some clothes similar to what's in her previous world. Sure, she likes to wear dresses like those princess cartoon she often watched on Sundays, but nothing beats casual everyday wear. He smiles and she bubbles in glee. He leans to her and says that if she wants to make short skirts, she should just be sure to only wear it in her own room. She holds the fabric as she realizes what it just said. Then she shoves him away as she shouts, wah! She says that she never felt comfortable going outside in a short skirt anyway. He laughs and says, good. He hugs her from behind and says, because he is the only one allowed to see her wearing these kind of clothes. He has hands around her as he says that he didn't know her school uniform could look so attractive when she's wearing it now. She blushes and screams, what? He says that maybe because it's a tight fit. She tells him not to say something like that, and he should let her go. He says that's a nice voice. He told her right. He can pounce on her at any time. Her stomach growls in hunger. She moves out of his hands and says how embarrassing. He asks her if she is hungry. He gets up from the bed and turns around while calling over his shoulder that he'll ask the servants to bring them some food. She realizes that was his stomach rumbling. She tells him that she'll go take a bath first. He asks her if she wants him, and she interrupts him saying that he shouldn't come in without permission. He tells her that she should lock the door then. She realizes that he's right. She remembers that the lock was so high up, she couldn't reach it. He makes a noise indicating he doesn't believe her. She hits his chest and tells him to stop teasing her. He says that he can't help it. She's too cute. Next we see food arranged in front of them and he tells her bon appetit. Our girl takes a spoon and moans in delight and says that it's good. This perks the Demon King as he says of course it is. They have the best cooks here. She stares at him with an unreadable expression and he asks her, what's wrong? She says that he's a king, right? He says, yeah, why? He says, yeah, why? She admits that he doesn't act very kingly. Look at how he sits. He licks his fingers while eating. He hollers and says, yeah. She thinks, why is he proud of that? He says that she's the only one here. He doesn't need to be all formal-like. But if it bother her that much, he could eat more normally. She wipes her mouth with a napkin and says that there's no need for all that. This is his place after all. She's only staying here. She thinks that she's just wonders, rather than a king. He's more suited to be a mafia boss. He admits that if he could choose, he wouldn't have become king. Being a normal citizen suits him more. He sighs and scratches the back of his head, admitting that taking care of the people can be tiring. He asks her if he knows what his wish is. She asks what is it. He blushes and says that his wish is to be able to live with her in a rural village, then they'll have lots of kids there. She says, what kids? Our demon king says, but it was she who wanted him to be king. A long time ago, to make the kingdom and even the entire world a better place. Even if she's forgotten, he still fulfill that promise of theirs. He takes her hand in his and caresses it lovingly. He kisses her hand and says most importantly, he can protect her and make her happy. She blushes and stutters. He turns away from her and says, "Oh, yeah, that reminds him. He has a book that might be useful to her." He gives her and says, "Here, this is a book containing the history of pixies. He hope it'll be able to jog some memories." She accepts the book and says, all right, she'll try reading it. She asks him, what is he going to do today? He says that he's just going to laze around here. She asks him that he's not working. He says that he should have been on marriage leave the entire week anyway. He has a soldier of his that he can trust to take care of his job in the meantime. Still, there are some jobs that he has to personally attend. For example, finding and punishing the one who hurt her. They have to die. She gulps at his words. Our heroine says, yeah, the marriage. What should she do? It feels like she's not contributing at all. Our guy says that all she has to do is wait until the day of the wedding. The preparations have been done since before she lost her memories. She says that she sees. She argues, but still, she should understand it first, right? At least he should give her a breakdown of the event. He says that it's like this and starts explaining it. Later, we see our girl trying to read the book Lex gave her earlier. She huffs at the book in her hand. She thinks that she's only read the first page. This book reads like a fantasy novel. No way something like this existed in her old world. Is this world actually real? He says she can't wrap her head around it, huh? She shouldn't force herself to read it if she can't bear it. She agrees with him. She asks him if she can ask something, and he tells her to shoot. She asks if she had wings like the pixie on the book's cover. His aura suddenly turns dark as he says that he should have known she'd ask something like this. She wonders why did it suddenly feel heavy in here. She cries out that he doesn't have to answer that but he tells her that she had wings. He apologizes and says sorry. It reminded him of a horrible accident, and it was his fault. She notices his dark demeanor and tells him to never mind her question. She never had wings anyway. She doesn't remember how having wings felt like, so she doesn't feel the difference, so he doesn't need to think about it. Suddenly, they hear knocking on the door, and someone says, "Good afternoon, Her Majesty. They are sorry for disturbing their rest." This is Kenzo and Ariane, and they have something important to report to him. Our guy huffs and says, there goes his holiday, he guess. She asks, why? What is it? Who are they? He says, she doesn't remember them either. She should come, he'll introduce her again. Two men walk in, one with green hair and long ears, while the other with brown hair and horns. The one with green hair says, The door opened much faster than he thought. On a cold morning like this, a lot of sheep gather on this field. Every day she comes here to watch their activities, but her eyes are glued only to one beautiful sheep. That sheep is named Lily. One day the king admits that he's going to eat her up. The two men prostrate and says, "Good morning, Your Majesty." Our king says that this better be good. She wonders who are they. The green-haired man said, of course, they have both good news and bad news. The king tells them to give him the bad news first. The green-haired man says that the bad news is that my lord must come with me. Kenzo will keep watch here in the meantime. That means Ariane, the green-haired man. He also says that the good news is their work this time will be quick. Maybe just an hour or two. Our king scratches the back of his head and says fine, he'll go prepare himself, and while they are here, Lily should come closer. Lily hesitates before she moves closer to our guy. He says he wants to introduce her. The brown-haired fellow is Kenzo. Kenzo blushes as he says hello, Lady Lily. Kenzo thinks, whoa, she's even more beautiful up close. He is Kenzo and is 18 years old. He's only been here for a year, but he was assigned to this division a few weeks ago. Our girl thinks that he's younger than her, but he's already this tall. He says that he knows Milady suffers from amnesia, but she actually never met him in the first place. For him as well, this is the first time he is meeting her directly. He's so happy to finally be able to meet her. He stretches out his hand to her. Our king roars and asks, what is he doing? He gulps and bows his head, saying, Please forgive his impudence, your majesty. He's a big fan of his, so he's also a fan of the people he loves, milord. Lex tells him to not touch her unless he wants to be fired. Kenzo breaks a sweat as he says, right, he's sorry. Our guy still glares at the brow-haired gourd as he huffs and says, whatever. Next is that one, Arion. Arion smiles and closes his eyes as he says, hello, Lady Lily. He and her have actually met before. He's the Majesty's advisor and guardian ever since he was a child. He's also seaman her when she was a child. Our girl Lily opens her mouth in surprise. The green-haired man and our girl share eye contact. Our girl says that Arion doesn't have any horns, and he also has a different color. His body is not too big, and even if he is still tall. Arion says that's because he's an elf, although he does have some demonic traits, as he descended from them. She says, hold on, he says that he watched over Lex since he was a kid? So Arion is older than Lex? Arion says, of course, he's 7 years older than him. Our girl blanches and says, what? Arion laughs and says that he even once cleaned up His Majesty's waist. Our guy says that one is a lie and she should not believe him. From the looks of it, Arion looks younger than Lex. Thank you. No thank you. The duo exchange gratitude to one another. She says Lex is much bigger than both of them. Does he really need guards? Our guy Lex says that he's the strongest one here. True, he doesn't need guards. But his guards are also her guards too. So he need them to protect her when he can't be by her side. She says, ooh. He says that he'll go ready himself first. 30 minutes. R gets dressed in black and green and says, all right, he's going now. Kenzo will be standing guard in front of her room, so she should stay inside. She says, all right. He asks her if he should bring her some books again. She says, oh, sure, and thinks that she has nothing else to do, so that would be nice. He says that he really doesn't want to go. Even though she's guarded, he's still worried. He bends down to nuzzle her neck. She pushes him away and says, don't. He chuckles and says that she should come one. It's just a kiss. He says that he'll be right back and she can take care of herself all right. She reddens and says that she knows. She thinks that he always makes her heart beat faster. Our king tells Kenzo to protect his fiancé and he'll be going now. Kenzo prostrates and says understood. Lex walks away and she realizes that he's gone. She should feel relieved. But instead, why does it feel like she's lost something? Later on, our girl tells Kenzo that she'll go back to her room now. He says understood, milady. She should have a good rest. A dark-haired lady with horns shouts his name and asks for confirmation. He tells her yes. What is it? She asks him if he can come to the servants' room for a bit. A maid needs some help. Kenzo scratches the back of his head and says, what? Why? But he's assigned. The maid insists that there's no time. Let her keep watch over Lady Lily's room. He says, is that so? All right, she believes him. Kenzo runs out of the room, saying, Lady Lily, he's sorry. He'll be gone for a bit. Lily says that yes, it's okay. The maid addresses her that, milady, she should get back to her room. Our girl says, oh, all right. As she turns around, the maid brings out a wooden stick ready to tail a swing at her. A person asks, is she sure? She's the one? Another says definitely they don't recognize her. She's the fiancée of Lex, the person insults him. Our girl opens her eyes and looks at her kidnappers. One person says that they know that, but she's lost her memories. Are they sure she could do it? Another says only her memories are lost. She should still be able to use her spells. Our girl sits up and wonders what happened. She can't move. They tied her hands and legs. A man with horns and black hair says, looks like she is awake. Hey, now that she's awake, she should get him out of here. She says what? The maid of before says that her spell is needed to open the cells in here, and only she can do it. Our girl raises a brow and says what? He tells her to quit acting dumb. She should just release him from here. He mocks her, saying that she can scream for help all she wants. They won't be able to hear her. This is the deepest part of the dungeon. Even the guards rarely come here. Our girl says she can't use magic. The maid tells the guy behind the bars that she told him she lost her memories. The guy glares at the maid and says she is taking her side. Lily says that even if she does remember, she still wouldn't open it. He must have been imprisoned for doing something evil. He glares at our girl and says hey to the maid and that the maid should bring her closer here. The maid grips Lily and drags her over to the cells. Lily says, what is he going to do? What do they want? She thinks that she's scared. He touches her chin and says that she's a pain just like Lex, but she's cute. If he kisses her, he wonders how Lex would react. Her heartbeat accelerates at his words. Light blue light appears and shines on the man behind bars as he asks what's happening. He notices that his hand is frozen, and he demands her to tell him what has she done to him. She says she couldn't use any magic. Then he insults her. Our main guy suddenly appears and says he wanted to dies that bad, huh? He uses his sword to kill the man. Our main girl backs away as she sees blood and thinks, did he die? Our guy glares at Maid and she gulps. He asks if the maid was the one who brought Lily here. The maid shivers on the spot as she says, forgive me, he was the one who threatened her to. Our guy tells her plainly that she has to die too. Our girl cries out, don't Lex from her place on the floor. Lex argues that she put her in danger. Lily tells him that didn't he listen? She was being threatened, so he should not kill her. Lex asks Lily if she can trust someone who harmed her. She should just stay there if she doesn't want to see this. She says, Lex, please don't. She thinks that she can't move fast with these bound legs. She struggles within them. She realizes that her body feels heavy, her sight. Our guy turns back and says, Lily. She feels so tired, cold. It feels like her body is freezing up. The Teddy of before hold her. She realizes that his touch, it's so warm. She blinks her eyes to see she is in bed and Lex is tucking her in. Lily sees where she is and calls out his name. His eyes widen and he says she's awake. She asks what happened. He tells her that after that incident, she was out cold for 2 days. She says 2 days? He says that he'll go get the doctor. She should wait here. The doctor, who is a blonde, walks in and says that our girl unleashed a spell when her condition wasn't stable yet, Milady. That's what made her unconscious. She'll give her vitamins to recover her strength. Her body is still too cold. Have more warm meals and drinks to recover. Our girl Lily says that she can use ice spells, but why does she get cold so easily? He tells her that it's because her power isn't stable yet. But she always gets cold easily even before this, come to think of it. Our doctor says that His Majesty can also help warm Lily up even more. Our guy crosses his hands over his chest and says he'll do it. The doctor says now if they will excuse her. Our girl asks Lex how did he know she was in the dungeons. He says that it's thanks to this. He shows her a flower in his palm. He says that he found her hairpin on the floor a bit far from her room. Then suddenly he saw ice sprouting on the walls. As he got closer to the dungeons, there was even more ice, so he was sure she'd be there as well. She says then, what happened to those two back then? He sighs and says that the man has died. She says dead and remembers that, yeah, his head. He says that he deserved it. He will gladly dirty his hands if it means a brighter future for his kingdom. Also, the woman ran away, damn it. She's been here for a few months. Looks like she knew all the short butts in here. He gives her a drink and tells her to drink it. He caresses her cheek and says she's to become not only a queen but also his wife. Whoever hurt her deserves to die. She takes the cup and drinks its content. Our guy admits that he was so worried, he was afraid they'd do something to her. For now, she needs to get her energy back. Here, he'll spoon-feed her. She says she can eat herself. After eating, he asks her, how is she feeling now? Does she still feel tired? Cold? She tells him that she's fine. She asks if Kenzo is all right. Was there really a problem in the servants' room that day? He says no, there was nothing. The maid lied. That's why he punished Kenzo for being so careless. He'd allowed her to get kidnapped. Her widen as she says, what? She argues that he didn't do anything wrong. Lex should not punish him. Lex argues that no matter what she says, it's finally. She says she'll go meet him. He tells her to not even know where his room is. She says that she'll go search until she finds him. He pulls her to his chest and says that she's really stubborn, isn't she? He realizes that it could be dangerous if Lily went on her own. He sighs and says fine, he'll take her there. Kenzo knees to the ground and begs the Demon King. He says, Your Majesty King Lex and Milady Lily, please forgive him for his negligence. Our girl raises her hands up and tells him that it's not his fault, Ken. He says she's too kind, me lady. Then he says that, wait, she called him Ken. Ah, she's very touched. She says, come on, he should lift his head up. Lex tells him that he's still gonna get his punishment. Kenzo says that he'll gladly accept it. Lily whines our guy's name as he says that Kenzo still needs to go through with it, so he wouldn't be so careless in the future. Kenzo says that it's all right, Princess Lily. He would feel guilty if he wasn't being punished at all. After all, it was his fault for being too careless. Lex holds her and says they should get back to the room. She really can't go outside her room until the day of their marriage comes. Our girl wonders that that's for the best, too. That incident the other day really made her afraid to get away from her here. Next, we see our girl huffing in bed. Our guy darts to her and asks what's wrong? Bad dream? She breaks into tears and says, "Sorry, Lex." She keeps waking him up. He says that she must still scared by that incident the other day, huh? Is she afraid of him? He is a demon too, just like him. She tells him that he's different. He's always kind to her, even though he can be a bit overprotective sometime. No, it's not just him who's kind to her. Chloe the doctor, the guards Kenzo and Ariane. True, at first she was scared of him. But as we talked and got to know each other in that dream, she closes her eyes and remembers the dream. She didn't feel like a dream at all, even though she's only met him a few days ago. She always feels safe, whenever she's with him, as if she's known him all her life. She says he's not scary to her at all. His heart skips a beat at her words, and he says, "Thank goodness." He nuzzles her cheek and then kisses her. He says that he'll make her forget about it then. Then he strips off his shirt. Our girl realizes that yesterday wasn't a dream. Lex was being so sweet. She can't get it out of her mind. Then our guy walks in with a towel on his head. He waves at her and says, "Morning, Lily." She says, he was here." He touches her body and asks her if it hurts anywhere on her body. She tells him that she is fine. He says that he wants to take her somewhere, so she should prepare herself. She says, isn't it bad for her to leave this room? He says that this time she's going to be fine. She asks, where are they going anyway? He tells her to a place where there's only the two of us, and he winks at her. She wonders if they aren't always together. She wonders, can she finally go for a walk? Then two people stop them and greet them by saying, "Good morning, Your Majesty." He says, "Yo, you two, everything good?" We see Kenzo and Ariane saying, "All under control." We see the maid prostrating saying, "Good morning, Your Majesty." He says, "Yo," she thinks that, wow, he's kinda cool when he's like this. He actually looks like a real king. He glances at her and pulls her closer and says, "Come this way." He says that Ariane and Kenzo should wait outside. They say understood. Next, we see her in a big room with red curtains and a grand chair. She says that this hall is kind of overwhelming, but it's amazing. So what should she do here? Next, the aura of the air shifts and asks what's wrong. He says before that, he wanted to ask her something. He says as they walked earlier, what was on her mind? We see our girl in angel wings. She says her name is Lily, and she is an angel. We angels have a task to keep this world safe, the chaos that's caused by the demon king Lex. But he says that he loves her and kisses her. She thinks, what has she done? This, the demon angel. Our girl looks away and says it's nothing important, and he says that she should just say it. He's curious. She tells him that he'll regret hearing it. He says never and smiles, trying to convince her. She says that from how he greeted everyone, she thought he was only nice towards Ariane, but it turns out she's nice to the servants too. He sees everyone here as friends, huh? He's a very nice king, even though his face can be scary. He blushes, that so? She's making him blush. He pats her head and says thank you. He's happy he said those words, but there's really nothing to it. He's just being himself as he rule. He hugs her to his side. He says that he can't help but think, how they chose to work here and not believe in any heretical ideas is already something incredible. They all believe in him. Getting to work here is hard. He has to personally test every single one of the servants here, so there are no spies. He doesn't want a repeat of the incident the other day. He says that the fewer people he trusts, the fewer people work here too. Sorry if it's dirty in here. She says that she can help clean it up. He tells her don't. She has an important job to do here. She asks he says such as learning more about this kingdom. She thinks sounds heavy. He tells her to come this way. He sees a portrait of a man and woman and asks him if those are his parents. He says, yup. She says, and the one they're carrying? That's him, how cute. He says, yees, that's me. She says so even him as a kid once too. That tattoo of his, has it been there since he was small? He taps it and says, yeah, he has had this since birth. All demons have one, just in different places. She says, oh, Chloe and Kenzo too? He says that Kenzo and Chloe too? The Demon King says that Kenzo has the tattoo on his arm. He don't know where Chloe's is. She says that his mother is so beautiful. He says, yeah, that she's a pixie just like her. It's because of her mom that he got to know her. She says that his mother is a pixie, so do all pixies have the same heterochromia? He says, yep, heterochromia, pale white skin and a small, winged body. She says, Then she touches the portrait and thinks, wings? She can't really see them in this painting. She says that is why their horn sizes are different. He says, maybe. Yeah, usually a child from a mixed-race parents also has the physical characteristics mixed up. He says another example would be Arion. He's an elf, but he's the tallest among other elves. He says now, Lily, as she's now his fiancée, he needs to tell her this. The problem in this kingdom of demons. His grandfather had 2 sons. Aslan is his father and Azura is his younger brother. Ever since it was under his grandfather's leadership, the social inequalities in this kingdom have been particularly severe. The strong pillage and trampled over weak. Not only the weak citizens of this kingdom suffered, but also citizens in other kingdoms. But not with his uncle. He thought that as long as the pillagers are still taxed, the kingdom should keep doing fine anyway. So Ganpa told his dad to do research into the other kingdoms first. Unfortunately, not a single kingdom, city, nor village would let his father in, all except the village of pixies. And that's where his parents met? He says correct. The relationship between his father and mother made it easier to cooperate with the elves as well. Bit by bit, father's connection with the other kingdoms improved. But this made Uncle furious. In his anger, he then killed Grandpa. A civil war happened, and her parents died. As for my uncle, he saw his dead body, but it was taken by his loyal followers. She says nothing to him. Suddenly she feels pain. She asks him if he's going. He says that he's sorry, Lily. He has to help his parents. His kingdom is in a worrisome state right now. She says she will go with him. Her spells can help. He tells her no, she should stay here. It's too dangerous. He pulls her in for a hug and says that he promises he'll come back. He says he's sorry. He's sorry because of him. He swears that he'll never leave her side again. Next, we see our guy hugging our girl and asking her if something is wrong. He tells her that she looks pale. They should go back to her room. Sorry, her story was a bit too heavy, huh? She raises her hand in pseudo-defense and assures him that she's fine, really. She walks toward him and trips, but he catches her in seconds. He says that she's not fine at all and calls her name. He swoops her into his arms. She tells him that he doesn't need to carry her like this, Lex. He says that there's no way she's letting her walk in this condition. Besides, he likes to carry her. She asks him, isn't she heavy? He says no way, she's too light, she should eat a lot more. Our girls fells that what did she just see? It all felt so real. Was it just her mind playing tricks? Or was that her previous life here? Or a prophecy of what's to come? Our girl asks her guy what exactly is he doing? He lays her in bed and asks her what's on her mind. Did she remember something? She wonders, but why in this position? Should she tell him? But she doesn't want Lex to worry. She thinks that even she doesn't know what's real and what's not. She sits up and says that she was thinking in Ainlite Shonlius. She wants to learn even more about this world, the kingdom, and about him and her. He says that he will tell her slowly, and he caresses her face. But right now, her health is more important. She says that then he should tell her one of those first. He says, all right, which one does she want first? She blushes and says, since they are getting married soon, she still wants to know more about him. She plays with her fingers as she says that our guy should tell her about their first meeting. He hides a smirk behind his hand and says, all right, then let's start from the beginning. He graduated from the first level of school in the demonic kingdom when she was 10 years old. After that, his parents decided he should continue his study outside of the kingdom. It was all so that he could live alongside other races. Since High Mother was a pixie, it was easy for him to enroll in a pixie school. He lived in the pixie village with Arion. His mother came every week, while his father only came once a month. In demon school, He learned more about physical activities than theoretical skills. So in his new school, he had to start from the beginning with classmates younger than him. And it was in that class that he met her. We see a young version of Lily saying that they are going to punish him. She doesn't want him to die, and she rushes to hug him as he is bound in chains. Our Demon King looks her in the eye and says, now. She should not worry herself sick over him. He's not going to live long anyway. She breaks into tears and says he should not talk like that. She hugs him tighter and cries into his body. She says that she's fine and he shouldn't let go. He should never leave her. All she wants is to stay with Lex forever. She wonders if fate would accept them. She was very small, but she was gutsy and brave. Our guy tells her that, heck, she's still small even now. Small and sexier, though. She glares at him and tells him to stop that. She says that she's listening, so he should get back on track already. We see our homegirl saying, hello, Lex. She is Lily Astor, the class rep here. She offers him a book and says that he started school a week since the year started, so he's quite behind in class. He can look at her notes. He takes the note and says thanks, and she says he's welcome. But he admits that he was a rat back then. Our girl, when she was younger, shouts his name and demands why he doodles all over her notes. She raises up her book for him to see his own doodles. He says because she lent her book to him, and she argues that he can't do that. Where's his gratitude? They always fought. He always found a way to tease her, because she was way too square and she's a perfectionist. But she's funny when she gets mad. They were always in the same class. Not a day went by where they didn't argue with each other. But as they grew older, they came to love each other. We now see our matured Demon King looking up with nostalgia as he says that he confessed to her after they graduated from school. Lily says, wow, so he's already that annoying when he was small. He pinches her cheek and says that it's all her fault for being too funny. She reacts to the pain. He says that's that, and she should now go to sleep. She says that she's not asleep yet. He says then she should stay in the room. He'll bring books for her. She thinks that it's better if she learns bit by bit about this world. She opens the book and asks, what is he going to today? He says that he thinks he needs to get to the paperwork he's yet to approve. He wouldn't feel good if he kept asking Ariane to do those. He really doesn't feel like it right now, though. He hugs her and asks her if she wants to do something a bit more intimate. She says no. Why does he always end up thinking about those kind of things? 2 days before the wedding, Lex told our girl Lily to stay put inside her room, but she's so bored. She looks at Lex from across the room and says that he's still asleep. She admits that she tried reading, but there's a lot of things she doesn't understand. It's boring to just read all the time, too. She wants to do something else. Maybe sewing clothes would be fun. She wants to sew something for Lex, but she needs to know his size, and she knows that he's pretty big. And she doesn't want to know that she's making him a present. She takes a measuring tape and thinks that she's going to take his measurement quietly. She hopes that he doesn't wake up. Suddenly, he yanks her closer and pulls her to him. She falls like a heap on his chest. She wonders, why did he wake up? The Demon King smiles as he says, what this? He never, though Lily would be this assertive, and she cries no. He licks her neck and tells to not be shy, and he's all hers after all. She can hug him any time. She cries and says, but she was just... Next, someone knocks on the door, interrupting their moment. The person behind the door says, my lord. They're sorry to bother him, but they bring news. Our guy growls and flips our girl onto the bed and says, they're such a pain. Right when he was having fun, too. Our girl covers herself and says, thank goodness. She got his size. Our guy gets dressed and says, sorry, Lily, he has to go now. He'll be back in the evening. He wears a gold and black outfit. He also says that Kenzo and Ariane will be standing guard outside this room. She should call them if she needs anything. She thinks yes. She's sure she can finish it before Lex comes back. Let's do this. He notices her joy, and he cups her face and asks if she is happy since he's leaving. What is she going to do then? She says that she will read books like usual. He always disturbs her when she is reading something. He agrees with her. He says that she should send him off with a kiss. He kisses her cheek and tells her to take care of herself, all right? He ruffles her hair, and she says that she's not going anywhere and he knows, and he shouldn't mess her hair up. She touches her and thinks that now her hair is all messy, and she thinks she's going to take a bath first. Later we see her stretching and thinks no good. His C's is too big. She's going to need a lot more time than she expected. She's not finished yet, and it's already evening. Suddenly, our guy walks in and says he leaves the rest to Arion. It dawned on her that he's back. She need to put all these things away. If you're eager for the next chapter, don't forget to drop a comment. Please subscribe, like, and share.